You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 30, part 2. This podcast is dedicated to Circus. It's a place for professionals to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to get a sneak peek into the industry. Hey friends, fans, and enemies, I'm Shannon McKenna, and I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com. This episode is the second part of an interview I did with acrobatic clown Joel Baker. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, go back and do that because we kind of dive right into the episode. We dive back into the interview in this episode. Before I do that, I have a little mini interview to share with you from one of my Patreons. Opal Schwartz generously supports the podcast each month, and I wanted to call her up and personally thank her and give her the chance to record a message that will play at the end of this episode and every episode forever. Here are some little snippets, about a 1.5-minute clip of our 15-minute conversation.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a week, but it's good.
Where do you live? Tell me about your life.
So I live in Minneapolis.
Cool.
Minnesota. I am a receptionist. I don't do a lot of aerial stuff. I do mostly like fitness aerial. It's like weirdly surreal to like be talking to you and know I'm talking to you, but like still hear the podcast voice.
It's actually not a podcast voice. It's just how I sound all the time.
Right. But like, but it's like, oh, like this is happening to me. Like this is like, I'm part of this. It's a thing.
You're a huge part of this. No, like $30 a month is like huge. Thank you so much for that. That means a lot.
Yeah. And
awesome.
That's one of those that like I binged your podcast and like by the time I got to like episode 15, I was like, yeah, these need to keep happening.
You get a 30-second splot. You get a 30-second splot to say whatever. A little spiel, little rundown. Have you prepared something?
I've prepared nothing.
Work. Yeah, nobody ever does. Don't worry. You also don't have to do it.
But it's at the same time, like, how fun is it going to be to hear my voice at the end of a podcast?
Yeah. You can hear what Opal recorded at the end of this podcast episode. And if you want to talk to me, if you want me to call you up and record a little message for the rest of the listeners, you can go to patreon.com/theartistathlete. People at the enemy level, so I have my friends, my fans, my enemies, and people at the enemy level, which means they give $30 a month or more, get a little Skype sesh with me, where we record a message. And it's super fun, super easy. As you can hear, you literally don't have to do anything but let me Skype you. So now that we have finished with Ms. Opal, thank you so much again, Opal. Let's get back to the nitty gritty. Part 2 of my interview with Joel Baker.
This is where I was. I'm going to tell you where I was. Okay, So I come back to San Francisco after
the cruise ship.
Yes. And I get this call from this circus in Hawaii, right? To do this gig to replace this Spanish clown who like broke his leg on stage.
Oh, bummer.
And I'm thinking, I don't know if you remember Magnum PI. Mm-mm. But you don't, because you're too young.
I mean, I know the reference, but I only know Magnum PI.
As a kid from the 80s, I remember, it was one of my favorite shows as a kid, right?
Yeah.
He would wake up in the morning, he would jump in the ocean in Hawaii, he'd go swimming, and then he'd solve an awesome mystery, right? Like, that's what he would do. And I was like, I'm just going to Magnum PI the whole thing. I'm just going to jump in the ocean every morning. I'm just going to have a cool day.
Yeah. Solve some mysteries. Like grow a mustache, whatever. And then so I did. And then I was doing this show where I saw this beautiful girl in the audience, right? And she kind of glowed. She kind of had this glow. I never saw anything like that before. Like she kind of just popped and glowed, and she just I couldn't take my eyes off of her for very long. And she was sitting in the audience.
She was in the audience
of your show.
of my show. And I even remember asking this Russian acrobat backstage. I was like, man, do you see that girl in the audience? And he's, I don't see anyone. Told me, I don't see anyone out there. What are you talking about? But this girl was like, she was glowing, right? And so after the show, I wanted to meet her. So I kind of like, and all the artists had to meet the audience coming out of the theater.
Do you like doing that?
Kind of like in Germany, I like it, because they give you a free drink. And
right.
So you go and you meet the public after the show, and it's pretty fun. But I wanted to meet her because she just like was amazing, right? And I waited outside, and all these you have to come up this escalator, and you meet the artists waiting right there. And she came up the escalator and she did this total U-turn and dodged me. Right? And she didn't she didn't follow the crowd, and she just totally went out the back way. And I think it's because she was shy. Like, she kind of wanted to meet me too, I found out later, but she dodged me. And then she ended up running into the technicians from the show that night. And she was asking about me and the show, and the technicians were like, that was a crappy show tonight. Come back later, here's our number, come back and get you a free ticket to the show, and you could see it again. And so she took the number, and what the technician did was he accidentally gave her the number of the theater, right? And not his number. So she called the theater and left a message that night, and she was like, this is Samantha, I'm calling about, I talked to you about the clown who was in the show and blah blah blah. I wanted to see the show again. And so I come into work the next day into the theater, and they tell me in the office, some girl called looking for you and asking about you, and she left a message, and here's her number, right? And so and I didn't know it was her, right? So I took the number.
You thought it was some other girl?
I just thought it was some random.
Because this happens to you all the time,
right? Yeah. No, never, ever. And so I put it on the fridge in my apartment, right? And I waited to call it. Right?
Like Magnum P.I. would do.
Like Magnum P.I. would do.
Yeah.
Right?
Twirl his mustache, swim in the ocean.
Right, totally.
Not call the girl immediately.
And swim in the morning and then call the girl at night. And then so I gave her a call, and at night the theater would become a club, right? So they could make more money, right? So they had like this, this club that would happen. So I invited her to the club after the show. At first I called her and she's like, I can't talk now, I have to go, I'm at work. And I was like, all right, well, call me back. And she called me back. And we talked for a little while, and then we decided to have that date. And she showed up for the date, and it was her, right? It was the girl that I wanted to meet, right? We ended up hanging out. She showed me the island, and we fell in love in Hawaii. And after the contract was done, I thought I wouldn't see her again. But we were on the same flight back to San Francisco.
What?
Yeah. She was going to, because her grandmother was sick or something.
Okay.
She was going back to San Francisco, and she lived here.
She lived here?
Yeah.
So she was visiting Hawaii?
No, she got her master's there at the University of Hawaii.
Okay.
And she was working there.
Okay.
And she was she was at a point in her life where she's ready to leave. And so we decided to hang out in the city, right, in San Francisco. So we kept hanging out. And I said, you know what, because I fell in love with Berlin when I worked for Loft. Come back with me and we'll live in Berlin. And she's like, all right, cool. And because she spoke fluent German. And she dated someone from Germany, right?
Yeah.
So she learned German. She spoke fluent German. But she's from Argentina, right? So anyway.
Cool.
So we go to Berlin. We get this great flat, and I start.
Where in Berlin was it?
This was in
the flat?
I think we lived in the Prince.
Oh yeah.
Right? Prince Lauberg. It's a great place to live, right? And be in love. So we lived in Berlin, and I started beating the street right away for a gig. Right?
Yeah.
I had like a seat, like back then it was like, a CV, like, hard copy of everything, right? Resume, everything, right? And
Sure.
so I had like, I actually like would walk into a theater and go, this is my work and this is my resume. And this is what I'm, And so I got hired to be in the first cast of Soap, right? At the Chameleon.
I always thought it was traditionally a female clown.
No.
Because that's who
No, it was me first.
they've been casting
right?
recently.
Right, totally. Well, it's been going now for 10 years, right?
It's the show that will never die.
Right.
Yeah.
So I got that gig, right? And I did that for a year, and then they decided to move the show, to bring the show to Australia. It was like the first time like it left the Chameleon. And at the same time, I was walking through Berlin, and I was like vintage shopping, right? Going to some shops and stuff. I found this t-shirt that was like a Stevie Wonder tour shirt, right? And on the back of it, it was called the Love Tour. It was called Love, and the name of the tour was Love is the Key, right? And I went, wow, sweet, a Stevie Wonder tour shirt, right? In Berlin. And I bought it, and at the same time, 15 minutes later, I got this phone call from Cirque du Soleil. And it was the head of casting for clowns. And he said, I think we have a role for you, and it's in the show Love, right? And I looked down at the shirt that said Love is the Key, and I went, I'm interested. And he's like, okay, cool. And he's like, here, this is what I need you to do. And he told me the things he wanted on video and things that I had to do.
I have to stop and ask you real quick.
Sure.
You said something really great at the very beginning of this interview, which is when the right thing happens, green lights just go off. Like when you find your like...
Well, you get green light after green light.
You get green light after green light.
Doors open up.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm wondering, did you look at that shirt at the time and you were like, this is a green light? Like,
oh yeah, totally.
You like recognize... Does this happen to you a lot? Or are there very... Okay.
It does. I think it's because, they say clowns are good luck, right?
I've never heard anyone say that. But
clowns are good luck.
I'll go for it. Yeah.
So I had it on the table. Do I go to Australia with soap, or do I take this contract with the Cirque? And I decided to move to Vegas and take the show.
Yeah.
Because after negotiation, I decided this is what I want to do.
And Samantha was cool with this?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, of course.
She was just. What did she do?
Samantha is a poet. And she's a writer.
Nice.
And she's also a teacher, right? And that's one reason why we got along so well, is because she's a poet and I'm a clown. And we had a dinner once with Dimitri. Like we had dinner with Dimitri once in Berlin. And he said, you're a clown and she's a poet. He told us there's a writer named Henry Miller who said, a clown is a poet in action. And that's why you guys are such a good couple.
A clown is a poet in action. That's super cool.
We got married later.
Right. Okay. That's awesome.
So yeah.
So you moved to Vegas. We're sitting outside in the hall right now. Which is why you guys are hearing all this weird like side noise.
Sorry
which my
about
editor
that.
probably can't. I don't know if he'll edit it out or not. But now we've acknowledged it, so it's not weird.
So
you've moved to Vegas.
So I moved to Vegas 2008.
Which is like the same city as Berlin.
No, God, no. It's such like a interesting place to live. I'll say interesting, right?
Yeah, you could say that.
It's easier when you're there with someone you do love. I was there for 7 years, right? We bought a house. We lived.
You were on Love for 7 years?
Yeah, I was in the cast for 7 years, from 2008 to 2014.
And did you originate the role? I haven't seen Love.
No, it was originated by someone before me.
What is that like as a clown to come into a role that?
Well, it was originated like 2 years before me, but I would have to say kind of undeveloped as a role itself, right? As a character role.
Sure.
Right? So I got to bring a lot to it, which was fantastic, right?
Yeah.
So if you get to bring a lot to a role, it's pretty magical, right? Because then you can really give it a lot of energy that's you, and give it a lot of ideas. And they had a lot to propose, right? So they had this like rope ladder that was up in the grid, like 60 to 70 feet up, right? In the grid of the theater. Like a rope ladder that was on a conveyor belt. And when they flipped the switch, the rope ladder would come down out of the grid and it would hang over the stage, right? And the director said, can you get on that? Can you do something on that? And I just said, yeah, like that looks really fun, and it was pretty scary, right? At first, because it's like this rope ladder that swings and sways, and it's huge, and it's, and I would have to run across the stage and run up this skate ramp, and then slide down the other end, and then run around this other part of the stage, and then grab the rope ladder and swing and start climbing to get away with from everything on stage, right? In the show. It was kind of like a nightmare circus, the scene. And I had to climb this rope ladder, and as soon as I start climbing, they would start flying it out. And then I would freak out and start trying to climb down, and then they would fly the thing all the way up, right?
That's
like
good.
60 feet up.
Yeah.
So I would lock into a hand loop, and I would do these crazy slip falls and on the ladder, and do this crazy acrobatic comedy on the rope ladder, right? As they flew it out.
Yeah.
And I would yell, "Help!" And that would start like the song "Help" from the Beatles, right?
Oh, nice.
And that would be the beginning of the number
Nice.
right there. It was really challenging, and it was like, it was one of my favorite shows because, like I said earlier, like you create a nice sense of wonder, right? And the beginning of that show, me and the other nowhere men, our characters were the nowhere men, right? And we would walk across this bridge covered in smoke with these umbrellas that we would hold, and the umbrellas had light underneath them.
Nice.
So we were lit really nice, and it was really mysterious and very cool. And that was it. That was the place where, yeah, this is the perfect place to just create this sense, right? The sense of wonder and exploring and seeing everything for the first time. And it really, the stage is so beautiful that it just makes you feel like that. Right?
And even after 7 years.
Yeah.
So felt,
like every show.
Nice.
Every show, I did 10 shows a week for 7 years.
Yeah.
And every show felt like that.
So why did you leave Cirque?
I got this feeling in 2014, I got this feeling like it's time to go. Like this like 7 years is a good run.
Yeah.
And I was ready to do my own ideas. I was ready to do my numbers that
Yeah.
I'd been working on for 7 years, right? Like behind the scenes, just working on my hand balancing number, and this character that I wanted to bring to life, right? I was really hungry to bring this bellboy character to life, right? Mm-hmm. And because I'd made the costume in Berlin before I left with this costume maker for variety shows. And then I got the call from Cirque, right? And I wasn't able to even build this character, right? But I got the costume made. So I had it in my closet, and it was just staring at me every day, right? And the ideas were staring at me every day. And
Yeah.
the ideas that I wanted to create this personage, right? This character that, was a bellhop, and it would be perfect for variety shows where, you could be a doorman, you could be an usher, you could be all these different things as a bellhop, right? And it's funny. Like, it's a funny character.
And the bellhop wave is so like Masha's act from Demand a couple of years. Like it's
Right.
like such a.
I was
yeah.
before all that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
This was like this was.
No. I know you were, but it's just funny because I feel like that's
Right. Totally.
characters.
Yeah,
So,
but I think that happened with Hotel Budapest, right? Hotel Budapest came out,
yeah.
and that started a wave of interesting ideas for a lot of people, shows, characters, But I had it when I was in the pickles, this idea of a bellhop, and I did it a couple times, before, and so I developed all these ideas for this character, and I still do, right? Like I have a comedy aerial number with an umbrella apparatus that I created that's like a mix of trapeze tricks and strap tricks, right?
Yeah.
Where it's a hand loop you lock into.
Yeah.
And it's a clown number where I'm holding an umbrella and a storm starts on stage.
Uh-huh.
And you hear this wind and you hear this lightning and you hear this thunder crack and the lights change and things get dark and windy, and I get caught up in this big hurricane and it blows me into the air, right?
Nice.
In a fast single spin, and I go up like
nice.
full working height. It's really fast.
Fun.
And it's really fun. It's really fun to watch, and it's funny because, comedy is a man in trouble, right? It's like this situation where you have to train here, so you can perform here, right? So you train all these hard tricks.
He's making a hand gesture that's high and then a hand gesture.
So you train all your tricks, and then you perform them in a way where you're a victim, right? Because acrobatic comedy is really cool in the way that, like, as an acrobat, you're in control of your apparatus, but as a clown, your apparatus is in control of you, right? So you're a victim.
This podcast is brought to you by The Artist Athlete. Did you know that The Artist Athlete is more than just a podcast? It's a growing online resource for students of the aerial arts to deepen their journey to badassery by accessing techniques approved by physical therapists and master coaches in the industry. Our current spotlight is on the fundamentals of aerial alignment, a practical manual for hanging upside down. This online manual is a step-by-step guide. It is complete with photos, videos, and exercises that you can implement immediately to help you gain the strength and awareness you need for an aerial practice that promotes shoulder health and longevity and good posture upright, so you don't walk around like a gorilla. But don't just take my word for it. Here's Circus physical therapist Dr. Jen Crane of Cirque Physio to tell you more.
The fundamentals of aerial alignment is an absolute must-have for every aerialist of every level. I can't even tell you how many shoulder injuries I treat that are a direct result of rushing past the basics in an attempt to get a trick too soon. In the manual, Shannon deconstructs the fundamentals, including the correct muscular engagement to safely arrive in these positions and the rationale for why it matters. Of course, in addition to all of these fabulous pearls of wisdom, the book is also ridiculously fun to read. It's been lovingly garnished with the Shannon humor we all know and love.
Thanks, Jen. Cirque Physio is also featured in the book to give scientific insight into why it all works. Pick up your copy today by going to theartistathlete.com and clicking e-manuals. Listeners of the podcast can get a 10% discount by typing in the offer code PODCAST at checkout. Again, that's theartistathlete.com, offer code PODCAST. Now, back to the show. How do you, I feel like you're a person who is always generating ideas.
Okay, I'm going to give you
Is that
3
true?
rules of circus. The 3 rules that I live by.
Break it down, Joel.
Okay?
Yeah.
Right. This is the 3 rules I live by. Always be working on a new idea.
Uh-huh.
Never be lazy.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And save your money. Those are the 3 things in circus that will like help you get to where you really want to be, right?
Always be working on a new idea.
Always be working on a new idea.
Never be
lazy. And
Save
your
your
money.
money. Yes.
Right? So that's really helped me. It's like you can never be lazy. You always have to work on something new. And you always have to come up. And I think like that's one thing that I see lacking in a lot of areas. You know, it's like the lack of imagination. Right? Especially, right? Because you need a good imagination.
Well, but this is the thing, and I've been thinking a lot about this too, is like people, like when you're talking about training 6 hours with Lu Yi,
right.
You're just staring at your hand, like drills.
Sure.
And so like...
Well, a lot of it is cell memory, right? Like to acrobatically, like, you know, to learn something, it has to, you know, live in your body, right? So like a handstand is something that takes connection through the whole body.
Totally.
Right? And you have to learn how to use the body as one piece, right?
But I also think mentally you have to have the discipline to be able to take that kind of repetition and train your body to that level.
Sure.
Whereas at the same time, you have to have the openness to be able to let these ideas come in and always be fascinated by the next thing while still having the patience to train the thing that you need to train.
And if you combine a nice sense of wonder with an acrobatic skill, then like I said, you train here and you perform here. Like you do this handstand in this weird place, right? And on this lamp, on top of a lamp, like I do.
Yeah.
And you come down out of it, and you look at the audience with this like sense of like, what did I just do? You know, like I didn't know I could do that. You know what I mean? Like you have to have that, right? And the audience feels that too. You know, and it's as opposed to an acrobat where you know you can do it.
Right.
And you do it.
And everyone knows.
Everyone knows you can. But if you make it, like I said, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. So if you do...
Well, and also having the self-awareness. Like, if I go up and I do a pull-up, no one is going to be shocked.
Right.
Like...
Right.
Do you know?
Yeah. And you know, but it's how you get there, too. You know what I mean? Like, as a clown, no one sees that I'm strong and that I train. You know, they think I'm just like that 10-year-old skinny kid, you know, who's like, you know, hyper and weird, you know what I mean? And then you apply the skill, and then that's a surprise, right? And there's certain things a clown that always work, right? And like, you know, like surprises are funny, right? Surprises are funny. They're funny things, you know. It's how you approach it. But like when you surprise the audience with something they didn't expect you to do, usually at the end of your act, you know what I mean? You get to a place where no one expected you to reach, then it's a surprise, and it's really funny, and it's great, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how you end your number with this.
When you're building an act or a new idea, do you start at the end and then go to the beginning, or how does that?
No. I kind of start like David Lynch, right? Like the director, right? So he
with transcendental meditation. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that helps, right?
Yeah,
like
man.
if you've ever read Catching the Big Fish, that old book of his, right? Like it's you know, he starts like how did he start Blue Velvet, right? He starts with an idea where he just thought of an ear in a field, right? Like a severed ear. And then he's like, okay, I'll work from there, you know? Like,
Yeah,
and
okay.
then, like with my book number, like I started with changing a light bulb, right? And like, how could that be funny? And then you like he said, like you have one idea and it will lead you to the next. But you can feel it's a good idea. And then you follow that, you follow that idea and it leads you to the next. As long as you know that the next idea is in the next room, right? You know what I mean? You just have to find the doorway that leads you there. And then you start building on this one idea and you create a story around that one good idea. So yeah, and it's like, you know, clowning is like a condensed version of acting, like I said, right? It's like, it's all these emotional moments and all these fun actions like in 4 minutes, right?
And how do you reach that end then?
Like I said, you have to have a good imagination, right?
It just comes
like
to a natural end? Have you ever had an idea and
it's
painted
a circle.
yourself in a corner?
It's kind of a circle, right? Like the clown has a circle that he works around. You have a situation, have a problem, and then you try to solve that problem in all these different ways, right? And then you come to a place where like you think you solved the problem, but you haven't, right? And then you come to the very end of the circle where you saw the problem in a way no one expected you to, right? And so and it's funny, right?
Yeah,
it's a funny idea, right? So you go around this circle, right? And you end up in this place.
That's great.
Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. I mean, I'm just thinking about all the clown acts I've ever seen, and I'm like, sure, that's how that works.
That's how it works, right?
I just had never had anybody like.
There's not everyone agrees with the idea, but I use methods where first I make them laugh and then I show them the skill. You know what I mean? That works for me. It's like first you get to know the audience and they get to know you. And like when I do animation, I treat everyone like a friend I haven't seen in like 10 years. You know what I mean? Like, oh hey, how are you? You know, and I get to know everyone, right? And they get to know me and like, you know, we get to know each other and like each other and make each other laugh, and it's real. You know, I'll do that in animation. When people develop that with you, that relationship with you, right? Then you start to work, right? That's when you get to work, and when you start finding all the funny moments with the people that you've connected with, and you know, that's why I love Palazzo, because the people get to know who you are, and at the end of the show, it's like, wow, like I just followed this guy's story, you know, through and I like who he is, and like,
nice.
And after the shows, you take people out of their lives into this other one, and.
When you're working, or when you worked on this show, how much of this is you being like, I have this character, I'm taking
all of
them
it,
through,
all of it.
And Max is just like, fine, do whatever you want?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's your job as a clown, right? You have to have good ideas, and then the director says, you know what, I need a funny moment for this moment in the show. What do you got? And your job is to go, okay, cool. Because I have a lot of my material is transitions. Like I've come up with ideas that are numbers, but they're numbers that are transitions. So I have these ideas that introduce aerial numbers. I have ideas that are good for the beginning of certain things, right? And that fill up the space, right? And that make people laugh and keep things light for when you need to bring something on stage, or you need to strike something, or you need to like set something, you know? One of my favorites is the magic box, right? It's this apparatus that I created.
Yeah.
That's beautifully painted, right? Like something you'd find in an attic, like a beautiful old circus box. Like, but it looks old, right?
Yeah. That's kind of the box I pictured when you were telling me the story of your dad or your stepmother giving you this box. I pictured it being like this, like.
But this box like kind of like, so it floats in front of me, right? But I've got my hands through the back, right? Through these holes in the back of the box, right?
I feel like you're not allowed to be telling me. Like, you know how magicians like don't reveal their secrets? I'm like, anyway,
it's
no,
cool.
but go on.
I've been working with it long enough.
Yeah.
So then like I can set a tissue inside of it, right? And then a single point comes down, and I can rig a tissue and make it come out of the box, right? Clip it in, right? Or and I do puppetry with it.
Visual.
You know, I have one of those, like, you know, monkey gloves. It looks like a gorilla glove, you know, and I make it come out of the box. It's what I call like an infinite idea. Like, it's an idea that can go in a million different directions.
Right.
And connect a million different things. It doesn't just do one thing. It can tell many stories. And those are kind of the transitions and props that I make and things that are
Do you
infinite.
feel any ownership over any of this?
Yeah, well, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, and I've seen derivative things.
Yeah.
I've seen derivative ideas that come, but every clown does, right? Like I've seen guys do David Shiner's numbers. I've seen it's one of the downsides of having some brilliant ideas, right? Someone's got to see it.
So hard to be so smart. You
right?
poor thing.
No, I mean, hey, I want to be humble about it. It's like, I'm just doing what I do, right? But like, someone's going to see it and they're going to go, ooh, that's a great idea.
Right.
I can do it this way. And
have you ever seen anybody do it better? Like have an idea and then been like, oh.
only when I've worked with people like amazing directors, right? Where like, but I've been in a safe place, right? Like I had a creation with David Shiner, right? Like when I was working my number for one of the shows that Cirque had, right?
Yeah.
And David was my coach and he did my lamp number because I showed it to him and he's like, okay, we'll try it like this. And he did my lamp number and it was so freaking funny, right? It's much funnier than I do it, right? Because he's so experienced and so great, right?
Yeah,
and he did it
yeah.
and I just laughed. Like, I've never had my number make me laugh. Like, like that, I was
Sure.
like, holy crap, that's hilarious,
That is hilarious.
And he found, and he's so experienced, it's so great, he found all these moments that I still use, you know what I mean?
Yeah, nice.
He's like, use it. And I was like, all right, great.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And so things like that'll happen, where someone really experienced will use your equipment or your ideas, and then it inspires you, right?
Right.
To do something different.
Yeah.
But
Totally.
but no one's going to do it how you do it. As a clown, it's like, you could replace someone, right? But the energy is always going to be different.
Yeah.
Right? Or you could do someone's number, but the energy is always going to be different.
Oh,
and
totally.
the timing and all that stuff, because clowns are very individual.
I mean, people are. Artists are, I think.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, sometimes, yeah. I mean, but it's not our job to be like everyone else, right? Like, we have to be. There's a million people doing the same apparatus, right?
Correct.
So you have to find it. It's not what you do; it's how you do it. You have to find
sure.
a way to tell your own story, and you have to find a way to use your apparatus in a way no one's ever done.
Right.
And that's when your imagination kicks in. It's like, oh, a tissue can become a sheet on a bed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I could lay underneath it, and I can have a dream, and it could become like,
Absolutely.
like that.
Yeah.
Or like, like that lamp can become that, or what can come out of that box. You know what I mean? Surprises are funny. Like,
Surprises are funny.
right? So you find a way to.
Oversized shoes are also funny.
So that's how things work, with imagination.
That's awesome. I feel like if we kept talking, I would have a lot more editing. But I do have one more question for you. So Samantha and your daughter, they live here in San Francisco now?
We have a house in Pacifica now.
Nice.
And we moved into it after I left Cirque in 2014.
Okay.
And I started with Palazzo. So
Yeah.
I'm gone in Germany from October to March every year. And for the past, since I left in 2014, that's what I've been doing. And in the summers, I'm back home and I coach and I direct.
You don't seem like a very and I don't mean this in a bad way, but you don't seem like a goal-oriented person. Like I meet some circus artists who are like, I want to do El Waz, I want to do Seven Fingers, I want to do Cirque du Soleil, I want to do Circa, all before I'm 27. And
Well,
it seems
I've worked for Cirque El Waz. I was on Circopolis, right?
Yeah.
I've worked for Seven Fingers.
But I'm not saying
I've
like,
worked
but
for
you
Cirque du
didn't, but it
Soleil,
doesn't sound like, or the way you gave me. Well, you gave me a lot of stories. But the way that what I'm hearing from you is that it's not so much that you made these things happen, but one thing just kind of like led to the next.
Yeah.
In these ways.
I think, the Buddhists believe if you try to be a good person and you work on the self and you work on things that make you happy and you like, I don't want to bring the Buddha into it, but like,
Too late.
I think that like, work on the self is important, right? But if you try to work on yourself and try not to be a selfish person and you try to care about other people and you do things that put good ideas into the world, right? And a clown is really important, especially like right now, right? Like the world needs laughter and the world needs that energy and needs that like lightness.
A little bit of
things
wonder.
are so heavy,
Yeah.
And there's so many things that are going on that are good and there's so many ways to help, and like I think if you stay with it, good things will happen and you won't have to like, oh, I've got to get this, I've got to do this, and things and doors open, right?
Yeah.
If you try to be a good person, right?
Okay, I will.
So when people try to just do good things and put good things into the world, that things come back to you. You put the energy out, and things come back.
Don't be a shithead.
Right.
Be a good person.
Yeah, and and don't fuck with people's emotions, and try to look out for people, and there's a temptation to be selfish, right?
Yeah.
And to just care about number one. Just look,
Well, it's kind of like, I think as artists, it's also easy to fall into this like self-aware versus self-conscious. You have to be aware of yourself as an instrument and as an idea maker and as all these things, and a bit protective of it. I think there are ways where
and to be better than everyone else and to be like number one, right?
Yeah,
but like, it's
very tempting to start to get into that mindset.
Totally,
right?
That
little ego.
That's not what it's about, Yeah. It's not about that.
Nah, man.
It's just about it really is about being an artist, right? And manifesting your ideas and having ideas and working on the new ideas and bringing awesome things and ideas into the world.
Such good advice. All right, so you said always have a new idea.
Always be working on a new idea.
Always be working on a new idea.
Never be lazy.
Never be lazy.
And save your money.
Which leads me to the end. What advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your career?
I would say, don't be selfish.
Don't be selfish.
Don't be selfish. Care more about what other people think.
Oh, interesting.
Right? Yeah.
Care more about what other people
Care
think.
more about how other people feel and think. And I would say, learn to work more as a team. Because at first, you don't know how to work with other people on stage. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know how to work as a team as much. Because I never knew how to do that in the beginning. I was like, this is my idea, this is what I want to do, and this is where I want to go, and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And it got me places, but like, you lose connections that way, You don't make as many friends as you could.
Totally.
I think you have to like, not be selfish.
Don't be selfish.
Yeah.
Make friends.
With yourself or with your time, And don't keep your world small. Like, go places, do awesome things, read amazing things, expand.
It sounds like you did that.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and I still do.
It's good advice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be a clown forever, so to just, to always be doing that, right? It's never ending as a clown.
Or as a person. Or as an interviewer, actually.
Yeah.
My friend Hannah Rose, she's not a circus person at all. She's back in Atlanta, and she was like, I listened to one of your podcast episodes. It was really good, Shannon. I just have one note for you, and that's, before you ask a question, you should try to breathe. I was like, she's so fucking right. She's right.
Yeah, totally. That breath is so important, right?
I'll
tell you 3 things you're doing your whole life. There's a way that you work on your breath in circus, right? So you have 3 things you're doing your whole life, right? You're inhaling, right? Right? You're holding your breath, and you're exhaling, right? You're doing those 3 things.
Yeah.
Right? And those 3 things create different situations, and they jumpstart different emotions from the audience, right? When you're doing them on stage. So when you're on stage and you find your place before you start your number, you can exhale, right? And it kind of like, it's a starting point, right? And it relaxes the body, and it also relaxes the audience too. Like, you can kind of hear people do it when you do it too, like when you let out your breath, and the audience can't laugh until they're relaxed, right? So so it's a way to like, you come out on stage, and you inhale and you exhale, and you find this moment where it's time to begin your number. When you inhale, and it's kind of like a surprise, right? When you inhale, right? Like, and that physically looks a certain way, and unconsciously, like, it tells the audience something too, right? Without you needing to say anything, right? So an inhale is like a surprise, and holding the breath is like a moment of suspense, right? You can hold your breath, and you can make the audience feel like they're, something's about to happen, right? Something's about to start, or like something was scary, or something is, it makes you feel a certain way. It can make the audience feel a certain way, right?
Yeah.
And learning how to put those moments into a number is really fun too, right? Like, you find the moments where you breathe, right? Or you have to breathe. Because you do have to breathe on stage.
You do.
And then, and a lot of people do hold their breath in the beginning when they're learning how to breathe on stage, right? Yeah, so it's interesting too. That's interesting too. So there's a lot. There's so much to it, right?
There's so much. There's so much.
But yeah.
Well, thank you, Joel, for this 2-hour interview. This is like a whole nother, this is awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
I so appreciate this.
Absolutely. Yeah,
awesome.
sure. Absolutely.
Sweet.
Let's go train.
Yeah, let's do it. That was my interview with Joel Baker. If you made it past all that annoying background noise and to the end of the interview, thank you so much for listening. There was so much good stuff there, so many amazing stories and such great insight. But what impressed me overall about Joel's worldview is this idea that leads him. The motorcycle accident, the meeting of his father's first wife, the story of how he met his own wife, even the story of how he got his job on Love. They were these magical events. It's interesting, the more interviews I give with deeply creative people, the more I see this common thread. Many of them have this notion that there's something guiding them, or that their lives are guided by these moments of happenstance. If you've been following me on Instagram for a while, you know that there's this book that I'm low-key obsessed with. It's called The Artist's Way. And in it, author Julia Cameron does an amazing job of talking about this concept. So I'm just going to read a little passage about it. She says, Lewis and Clark headed west. Isaac Dinesen took off for Africa. We all have our Africas, those dark romantic notions that call to our deepest selves. When we answer that call, when we commit to it, we set in motion the principle that C.G. Jung dubbed synchronicity, loosely defined as the fortuitous intermeshing of events. Jung's own inner leanings brought him to experience and describe a phenomenon that some of us prefer to ignore, the possibility of an intelligent and responsive universe, acting and reacting in our own interests. I think one of the primary jobs of an artist is to make connections. This is me talking again as Shannon. I'm not reading anything anymore. Sometimes connections exist in unlikely places, right? Not just in our creative work, but within our own lives. And if your Africa, this deepest dream, is to become a circus artist, well, I encourage you to start searching for these moments of synchronicity. If Joel is correct and all these other people are correct and Julia Cameron is correct, you won't have to search that hard. You might be surprised at what happens if you start really committing to your dreams and believing that they're possible. How much other things in your life start to really pull in those dreams towards you. And I know that sounds insane, kind of, like I'm getting kind of off into woo-woo land, but just give it a try. You know, what do you have to lose? Also, if you want to maintain a successful career in circus, Joel dropped 3 rules to live by. And ever since we did this interview, I've probably said them to myself at least once a day. Those rules are 1, don't be lazy. 2, always be working on a new idea. And 3, save your money. The first 2 are pretty self-explanatory, and I see circus artists all the time in all levels working really hard and innovating. But that third piece of advice, that really stuck with me. Because as much as Joel is a clown, a physical poet leading a creative lifestyle, he's also giving advice that's incredibly practical. Save your money. And I've been thinking a lot about this too, actually. Over the past 30 episodes, how many guests I've had on this show, and they've given as their piece of advice, or they've thrown somewhere in the interview, they've mentioned something about the impact of money on their life. And so next week on the show, I'm bringing on a non-circus guest to talk about money. I've already done the interview. I haven't cut it yet. And I'm a bit nervous to share it with you, but the person I'm bringing on is an incredible expert and has her own amazing story, so hopefully it will be helpful. Thank you so much again to Joel Baker. If you want to see more of Joel, you can go to www.joelbakerclown.com or follow him on Instagram at Joel Baker Circus Artist. As always, my website is theartistathlete.com. I'm on Facebook, The Artist Athlete, and for aerial training tips and inspiration, find me on Instagram at _artist_athlete. Talk at you next week, friends, fans, and enemies. The Artist Athlete podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete podcast. Straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So, if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space, and we'd love to see you.
Hi, my name is Erica Lee. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an aerialist. I teach performing arts to elementary school during the day and do pole and slings and rope by night. I really like the Artist Athlete podcast because it gives me a lot of circus goals to look forward to. It gives me a lot of insight on what's going on around the world in circus, and that's why I'm on Patreon.
Hello, all. Thank you for tuning in to the Artist Athlete podcast. I am Opal Schwartz from Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're ever in the cities, feel free to stop by the Aviary Minneapolis. It's a great time. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and goodbye.